Okay, and here are the new windows that we ended up purchasing. We ended up getting these windows, and this is actually all three windows, the big ones behind it there. These all came from Lowe's, and we ended up going with the ReliaBilt. Let's see if you can see this here. ReliaBilt Series 3201. The side windows are double hung windows, meaning you can raise and lower both the top and bottom part of the glass. And the back window is, or the big window is the picture window. We opted to go for the Energy Star performance rating, which basically means that inside of these windows that they are filled with low E argon gas, and what that does is it helps make sure that it it's not as effective at transmitting energy. So basically, instead of just plain air inside the windows, it helps to insulate the home. So those are the windows we ended up going with, and you'll see how we install them here in just a minute. Okay, so some of these vinyl windows have some extra pieces of vinyl on the corners that stick out from when they're released from the mold. Sometimes these don't get trimmed down all the way, and so if you've got some pretty close tolerances on your window frame, you might have to trim these down with like a utility knife. And so these aren't too bad here, but I'm still going to probably trim them down just a little bit to make sure it goes in snug. And then like on this side here, these look pretty good. This one sticks out a little bit, so I'm going to trim this down as well. These windows also come with a header expander, which looks like this, and it goes right on top of the window. And basically, if you've got a gap, when you order your windows, if you've got a gap at the top of your window, if it's too much of a gap, this can raise and kind of fill that gap up. I think probably about an inch and a half, something like that. If you end up using an expansion or a header on your windows, recommend putting some kind of insulation underneath, some insulation designed either for windows, or if you use spray foam, make sure it's not the spray. Make sure the spray foam says specifically for windows, because otherwise that can expand too much, and if that happens, it can bow your window frame at the very least, and at the very worst, it could potentially crack your window or make it to where it won't open. So anyway, that's the header. In this case, we're not going to need it. It's close tolerance, so we should be able to just slide it right in. All right, now when you're installing these windows, basically you want to put these in to where you lift them up, you set them in over this window sill where it fits on the inside, and then you push it forward, and it should rest up against these window stops. So I'll show you what that looks like. Just inside, bottom of the sill, and then up. And that's pretty much it. You need to screw it in. There's included hardware on the windows, so screw it in the sides. You need to make sure the windows are plumb, so that way they're plumb and square, so that way when you open and close the windows, it'll be smooth operation and it won't bind at all. When you're installing the screws, make sure to get it square and plumb, to use shims. You can either use wooden shims, the traditional type of shim, or they make some composite or plastic shims that are also a good option. Once these windows are screwed in, then we'll come in with some spray foam that's designed for windows. Again, so that way that does not bow the windows at all. It just fills that air gap, and then these windows will be nice and tight and energy efficient and keep all the drafts out. So the other thing to know about these replacement windows is at the bottom, when you install the window, there tends to be a gap. That's because the original sill plate has a slope to it, so that way water runs down. The water actually runs away from the house and not in it, which is a really good thing. But with these replacement windows, what they do is they include this other piece of plastic that attaches to the bottom of the window, and the profile, one side is taller than the other, so depending on how much of a slope is on your windowsill, that's depends on it determines what side of this that you use. So what you want to do is you want to put this on the bottom of the window, before you lift it into place. Now on this one, we went ahead and put the window in place to see how much of an angle is needed. It looks like this is the short end. It's probably not tall enough, so let's flip it over to the long end, and it looks like that's probably going to do it. It's going to be close, but it looks like that's going to do it. And you can't put it on from the outside because it goes the entire length of the window. And so because you've got these window stops here, it has to be put on the bottom of the window before you lift it into place. And here we go. This is what it looks like with that expansion filler in place on the window. Everything's nice and filled up there. So as you can probably tell, it's getting late in the day, and in order to finish this up in the daylight, we're basically at a point to where we need to get these windows back in place so that way they can, stop the cold air from coming in overnight, but also for security purposes. We don't want to go to bed and have the front of our house completely open. So what we're going to do is temporarily, the way you would install these windows, what you have is you've got screw holes up here behind this little block, this cover here. So you've got a screw hole here on both sides, and then on the inside of the window, open this up here, you've got a screw hole down there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in the screws on these windows. Get these the windows basically just kind of loosely in place overnight, and then we will finish it up in the daytime by shimmying it out and insulating it, putting the trim back, and caulking. You also want to be careful not to screw the screws in all the way. Since it's not properly shimmed out, you don't want to bow the frame. So in our case, we left the screws sticking out quite a bit. It's pretty secure though, so just be careful. If you have to come to a stopping point and you need to secure the windows before you're completely done. And always the best practice would be to completely finish it, but at this point for me, I've ran out of time. Just make sure after you screw the window in that it still raises and lowers okay, and then you should probably check and make sure it's still square and level one last time before you finish the job, just to be sure. So between the replacement window and the old window frame, there should be somewhat of a gap. So you'll want to make sure that you insulate that gap with either some foam insulation that comes in a roll like this, or if the gap is too wide, you'll want to pick up some window and door insulating foam. And make sure that when you pick up the insulating foam that it's rated for windows and doors, because if you don't, if you get the normal kind, it has a lot of pressure in it when it expands, and it can actually bow the window frame and prevent you from being able to open and close your windows. So with this, basically you just spray it in between the gap of the replacement window and the old window frame, and it will expand and fill that void. And finally, you'll want to take the trim that you removed in the first step and reinstall it with some finish nails or a finish nail gun, and use some wood filler to fill the holes back in, and then paint it, and you're complete. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, and also check out tophomeowner.com, where we have a lot of other tips and tricks for being the top homeowner in your neighborhood.